episode 12 of Last Turn. I'm Bart, and I'm joined by Evan today, as usual. How are you doing today, Evan?
I'm doing very well, thank you for asking, Bart. I think I thought off a little bit from the release of Frozen Throne.
Yeah?
Yeah, or it also feels like it cooled down. I don't know, it moderated. We've sort of the fog is cleared.
Yeah, it's the Frozen Throne, but I still think it's quite hot or infested, and there's a little bit of a plague, but I think we can get there.
There's definitely an infestation. Um, one thing I've been really happy about with Frozen Throne is one of the classes I really want to sort of get a bunch of cool stuff it can do. Hopefully, at least somewhat competitive. Was Priest.
Ah,
And Priest kind of has two decks right now. Neither of them are really tier one. And I think only even have one of them that's tier two. There's Big Priest and there's Razakis.
mm.
Though maybe there's also Dragon Priest, but it's got a bunch of cool stuff it can do. Those decks are both like kind of cool and ridiculous in their own way, and they're both pretty good.
Yeah, I've been playing Big Priest a fair amount, and I really like the deck. It's like Priest is one of those classes I have not touched very much. It like classically wasn't doing the kinds of things I wanted to do in Hearthstone. It was never really proactive, but
Mm.
Big Priest is definitely a proactive Priest deck, and it can really get under pretty much any opponent. I mean, if you get lucky with Barnes, the game can just end on turn 4 against basically anybody.
Yeah, are you using Ysera?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because that card, like, particularly right now, I feel like is really good. Like, Druid just can't get that thing off the board. And if
Yeah.
that thing just sits there, it not only fills your hand with stuff, but you wind up every turn whatever they play the first few turns, a 4/12 is not going to have any trouble killing it. So you can't develop your board, and like if you're the Druid, you can't develop your board, and your opponent keeps getting a bunch of cards in their hand. There's like no coming back from that, no matter which Druid deck you're playing.
Yeah, and I mean, Ysera's cards in particular are really good for like maintaining the tempo that this deck can get early, like Dream. I mean, just like sapping your opponent's creatures for 0 mana is really, really strong.
Yeah,
And I mean, just being able to wipe the board for 5, like for 2 mana is also really strong, and like Ysera survives that, and that's really good. But even just getting an early Obsidian statue or even like a later Obsidian statue can pull back the game if you're already losing, or it can just make the game like unwinnable for your opponent. It can give them a really
hmm
hard time developing into like a 4/8 lifesteal that kills something when it dies. That's just like, if you're playing a fair aggro deck or something like Murloc Paladin or Pirate Warrior, that's really hard to deal with.
you can easily be at like 2 or 3 as the priest, and then pull one of those out of your ass and win.
Yeah, easily.
Like go up to like 18 and clear their board, and then summon another one, and your opponent will just scoop.
Yep. Yeah, so
Uh,
that's been cool. I've really liked what they've done with Priest, but there's also Razakis, which is like pretty interesting, and it has like a decent game against some of the popular decks right now. I mean, being Singleton is like a bit of a liability in Standard in particular, but Priest has access to a lot of cards that sort of give them other options, stuff like Glimmerroot and Shadow Visions, um, and like Radiant Elemental is a really good 2-drop, but yeah, that deck also has inevitability in the form of Shadow Reaper Anduin, and that can close the game out, even against like Jade Druid, which is shocking.
yeah, it has the potential to burst, and it sort of just has infinite value. Once it has Shadow Reaper Anduin out, your opponent isn't going to be able to develop a board. You're always going to be able to clear it.
Oh yeah.
And I think the deck has an exciting thing to me about the Razakis deck is I think it still has a lot of figuring out. Because it's Singleton, it can always sort of find a new way to fight the meta, like by using a different crab or by using an ooze or something like that.
Hmm.
But also, I've been seeing lists that run Novice Engineer and the 1/1 Elemental that is Death Rattle. Put a copy of a card in your opponent's deck into your hand.
Oh, the
Cri-
Crystalline Oracle.
yeah, Crystalline Oracle. Just because like early game it like does something,
Yeah.
and then late game it lets you do 2 more damage with your Shadow Reaper Anduin because it's a
Right.
card, and then
Totally.
it dies, and then it lets you do so it's like 4 damage late game. So it's actually just like I thought about it for a moment, and I realized it actually just is pretty relevant at all parts of the game. And the significance of a card like that, like a card I noticed is kind of good, Igneous Elemental.
Mm.
Like, if it were more relevant early game, that would be pretty great because of how many Shadow Reaper Anduin triggers it gives you late game.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's more exploration and more development for that deck, and I keep seeing slightly different lists that I think that it's evolving towards something that's still pretty strong. But Priest is definitely not the best class.
No, that's for sure. But it's nice to see them with some viable decks. I think that they had some stuff in Ungoro, but it was still a little bit lackluster. And now it seems like they have something that's like pretty close to mainstream, and maybe if there was some rebalancing done, could be really up there. But
Yeah, they're definitely really cool ways to win. Cheating out giant minions or blasting your opponent with, shadow magic.
oh yeah, that feels awesome. But as you said, it's definitely not the best class. I think that there is a clear winner here. Druid has been a little bit oppressive, and it's gotten sort of a bad look from the community as being, really powerful. I think that Jade Druid and slow control Druid decks got a lot of tools that just sort of pushed them over the edge, and even the fast aggro Druid deck got a few tools, like in the form of Druid of the Swarm and Crypt Lord.
I was listening, and sorry to interrupt. I was listening to our considerations of Crypt Lord when we were like evaluating the set before it was released, and Druid of the Swarm, and yeah, we missed on those.
Yeah, I think we definitely missed on those. So as I recall, Crypt Lord we just thought was like not very good, and
No.
Druid of the Swarm I think we acknowledged was decent, but didn't think it had a home.
Yeah, we actually didn't miss that badly. I think we mentioned Token Druid, and I think that's actually the deck it's best in.
Yeah,
Is
I think
Token
so too.
Druid. So we kind of hit on that one.
Well, even if
Uh,
it's not the deck it's best in, I think it's the best deck that it's good in. If that makes
yeah,
any sense.
yeah, that's what I meant too. That's
Yeah.
that's that's what I was trying to say. You have some numbers here. 19% representation, like at all ranks.
Oh yeah. So Jade Druid is
Oh, Jade Druid.
no. So this
Wow.
yeah. So this is at Legend.
Okay.
19% of all decks are Jade Druid.
Oh my
11% of
lord.
decks are aggro token, and then 6% of decks are just other like ramp or sort
At,
of the mid
at
range token build.
Yeah, at first I thought that 19% was the total Druid percentage. That's
No,
just
no.
one of the Druid
That's a
decks.
single Druid deck. Yeah, so these
Oh
numbers
man.
come from VS in the most recent Thursday report, the Vicious Syndicate.
Yeah,
But even
there's
before
one very recent.
yeah, so but even before this, there was like a meta stats report that had very similar numbers.
Hmm.
So this is at one rank, but at the other, at like sort of the lower ranks, like rank 5 to 1, and sort of all of the other non-legend ranks, Druid is less represented than this, but it's still, a considerable proportion of metagame. In all cases, it's above 25%. But at Legend, it's a whopping 36% of the decks. That's over a third of your games are going to be against a Druid.
And it's the two most popular ones are so different from each other. For one,
Yeah.
so the way that makes it like a really complicated situation, and then it could just there's another 6%. There's another card we missed on Strong Shell Scavenger,
hmm
Mr. Bolster, and that has created some pretty powerful decks as well.
Yeah, so definitely we wanted to dive deep on Druid and sort of what makes it so strong right now. It did get some new tools in Frozen Throne, but a lot of the reason it's strong is because of some of the existing tools that it had and the way that that pairs with the new tools. But yeah, Druid right now is pretty overrepresented. I mean, just to drive that home, there are 9 classes in Hearthstone. If you were expecting equal representation of all of the classes, it'd be like, like just over 10% chance of running into any individual class. But Druid is like more than 3 times more likely than that. It's approximately 3 times as likely as you would expect to see it if all classes were equally represented. And
It's like
that's like
300 something percent
that's
expected
huge.
value.
Yeah, that's just huge. The fact that like 36% of games are against this one class in this 9 class game, that suggests that maybe it's a little bit too powerful. Um,
Yeah.
so, what So let's talk about Jade Druid. I think that that's really the biggest defender here. It is certainly the most
Numerically, it is.
certainly yeah, numerically definitely. I mean, its matchup against pretty much all the other decks is like fine. It's like fine to favorable. It doesn't really have any horrendous matchups, which is pretty bad. But it's also the one that I think got helped the most by the expansion. Um,
Yeah, I mean, spread. I don't know if it's spreading plague or ultimate infestation, but both of those cards were really insane for the deck.
yeah, so I mean, I think it's probably Ultimate Infestation more than Spreading Plague.
Hmm.
I put in a lot of reps with the deck, and Ultimate Infestation just warps the way you play pretty much from any hand. Spreading Plague is really good. Don't get me wrong. I mean that can help you out a lot, and that can buy you several turns, which in a deck like Jade Druid is super valuable. Jade Druid wants to buy turns, and it can flip a game around that you're just doing really poorly in by giving you time, and that's really good. But Ultimate Infestation is it's the kind of card that like if you can find a place to land it against pretty much any deck, as soon as you land it and then untap the following turn, you're heavily favored.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter how. Like, even if you were kind of not winning, now you are,
Yeah,
and now you're going to.
yeah, it's definitely one of those cards that I think we acknowledged how powerful that effect is and acknowledged that 10 mana is a drawback, like during our set review,
Mhm.
but 10 mana is less of a drawback for Druid. And
Yeah, the fact that you have the card in your deck just lets you go balls deep into accelerating your mana
yeah,
and committing your nourishes to mana, and then once you refill your hand, it's sort of like your opponent and you would be on equal footing, except you have four more mana crystals than them and a 5/5 and 5 armor.
yeah, it's pretty unreal. So the tools that Jade Druid got are of course the Death Knight. The Death Knight's great. It's just like a high value card.
Yes.
It got Spreading Plague, which is like 5 mana and it just makes a bunch of 1/5 taunts, and like that's awesome against sort of go wide decks like Token Druid or Murloc Paladin if you can sort of land the card. And then Ultimate Infestation, which just gives you something way more powerful than any other control deck. No control deck is doing anything nearly as powerful as that. And I think the combination of these three cards just really pushed Druid a little bit over the top and made it so that other control decks couldn't compete. And this is a class that like before these cards were added was already like crushing oppressively other control decks. And now it just gave it tools to compete against like mid-range decks and aggro decks. And that's
Yeah,
kind of absurd.
yeah, and so yeah, for one, like spreading plague is just insane against the really good aggro decks.
Yeah.
It's you could be like basically in a completely losing position, no way of coming back, and then go to a point where you have no way of losing anymore. Um, and then though it doesn't really make you win.
It's true. Yeah.
And that's the reason that I've been preferring. Like I've found that once you have the first spreading plague, then after that, if you want more anti-aggro stuff, you should start adding primordial drakes rather than
Mm.
adding more spreading plagues.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been on one Spreading Plague as well.
but like, so a strategy like spamming ultimate infestations wouldn't really work if it weren't for Jade Idol. Like that's one
Mm.
of the reasons why Fatigue Warrior can't really be a thing. Like ultimately, like Fatigue Warrior could actually maybe have been fine against Jade Druid if Druid couldn't just refill its deck infinitely.
So
You
I
know?
actually I have thoughts on that. I'm not 100% sure if I agree. So part of the reason I don't agree is that so I definitely acknowledge what you're saying is that Jade Idol makes it so that like if you try to play Fatigue against Druid and you just have like a fair Fatigue deck or something, you're not going to be able to win because they can always go Infinite Fatigue. But they released a card to deal with that, and that's Skulking Geist. Um,
Yeah.
Part of the reason, but Skulking Geist is apparently not enough. Jade Druid is still overrepresented. So why might that be? So one reason is that Druid doesn't actually need to get to fatigue. I mean, don't I don't fatigue. I played the deck a lot, and I just in a very small fraction of my game am I getting down to the point where I'm at like the last 3 cards of my library. Sometimes I'm at the last 6 cards of my library, and my opponent is like 10 or 12 cards in their library or something, and I've just been able to dig faster than them. But a lot of the time I'm not winning like because I stuff my deck with Jade Idols and I'm just drawing them and making like 12/12s and stuff. Sometimes I'm just able to accelerate out my very fast like Jade, 6/6s and 7/7s and 8/8s way before my opponent can play anything serious. Like they might still be on 8 mana crystals and I might be like untapping the turn after infesting them and just playing like Jade Behemoth, Jade Spirit for like a 4/4 and a 5/5 or something. And that's just such a board that they can't deal with.
Yeah, it. I just I know what you're talking about, but when you're really going off against like I randomly played against a control warrior here and there,
Hmm.
um, and you just start obliterating them with ultimate infestations, and draw like nearly your entire deck with Nourished and the first ultimate infestation, and then make some copies of Jade Idol and then play the second one.
Right.
And I think that like there would be the like you do get a lot of value off of the fact that you have Jade Idols being put into your deck well before they could have drawn their Skulking Geist.
Oh, I agree with that for sure. I
And
see what you're saying.
uh, I feel like there were definitely like times against Warrior where I was at least really happy that I didn't need to play around Brawl so hard.
Right.
Like I didn't have to worry about running out of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe Warrior wouldn't be the fatigue deck, but some kind of fatigue deck might be a thing if it weren't for Jade Druid,
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
or that
So
at least being an option, in something like Mage or who knows.
yeah, so that's something that I do agree with. I think that there's a bunch of like some of the elemental mage decks are able to live sort of infinitely once they get the Death Knight out, but that's not enough against Jade Druid because they can just kill you infinitely. And they don't even need to necessarily go to the point where both decks are in fatigue, but they're just like infinitely drawing Jade Idols. Sometimes they can just like one thing that the presence of Ultimate Infestation has let me do as a Jade Druid player is to shuffle my Jade Idol a lot earlier than I would prior to Ultimate Infestation. Because I know once I infest, like I can draw, a Jade Idol, an additional Jade Idol, but it's not going to feel dead because I drew 4 other cards with it. And then even if I top deck the second one, like that's probably awesome. I probably also have a Jade Spirit and Jade Behemoth in my hand,
Yeah,
and
you
I could
you
just play them all.
you have a bunch of cards that cost a good deal of mana, so you're not like diluting them a little bit with these 1 mana cards that make minions is actually great.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
the average amount you can do per turn goes up by adding those to your deck.
Yeah. So it's like helps you fill out your curve, especially because like the Death Knight, gives you access to really nice hero power, which also helps you fill out your curve. But with some of the cards in the deck can create sort of awkward mana situations. So just being able to get more value out of Jade Idol from being able to like just draw more cards from your deck is super good. It almost mitigates the downside of shuffling the Jade. It does mitigate almost completely the
Hmm.
downside of shuffling the Jade Idol early, which is that like sometimes you'll draw it and you'll be making 4/4s or something, and like you really needed your Jade Behemoth there, or you really needed like a Jade Spirit or a swipe or something. But when you just have access to 2 Nourish and 2 Ultimate Infestation, that's just not a problem anymore.
Yeah, it's there's ways to look at each card as being the main problem, but they both kind of feed into each other.
Yeah, it's definitely the interaction of them. I mean,
But those cards, like ultimately, we're talking about like what the deck got Frozen Throne and why the deck is sort of oppressive, and I think those are two reasons.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It's the interaction of infestation with the rest of the deck because, like, it's not like we're seeing Ramp Druid just run over the ladder or anything. We're seeing Jade Druid in particular. So it's the interaction of Jade Druid with the new cards that it got. I do think that, like, of the new cards, Infest is the card that sort of most impacted the way you play the game. And, like, a lot of the time when I play the deck, I'm just like, keeping my ultimate infestation. That's insane. Like,
Yeah.
I've had games where like if I have a wild growth in my hand and like I'm on the play, I have like wild growth, ultimate infestation, Jade Spirit. I'm like, all right, well, pitch the Jade Spirit, and like if my opponent's a Druid, I might even consider keeping the Jade Spirit. It's just the card can be so the card is just so it changes the way you play all of your matchups so much, because all you really need to do is ramp into it and then cast it, and the game is basically over for your opponent. Like, you do a tempo swing, you kill like something, anything on their board, like a 2/2 or a 3/3 or like a 3/2 or something, and you get a 5/5, get some armor, and then refill your hand. And like once you refill your hand, at that point you're probably able to play a bunch of stuff. And that like and you probably also drew like a Nourish or an Ultimate Infestation, and you can just empty your hand and do it again over the course of several turns. And your mana crystal's ahead of your opponent, so you
Mhm.
can develop tempo way faster than they can. And like your Jades let you cheat on mana in a way. I mean, once your Jades are like 3/3s, Jade Idol is letting you cheat on mana. So it's super easy to use these cards like to ramp into this huge draw effect, and then once you've done that, it just helps you cheat on mana even more. And this is a class that's already cheating on mana. It's just not fair.
Yeah, the Jade the Jade strategy is really just about getting more mana and getting more cards to do it again and play another Jade card. And the more quickly you can get more cards and more mana, the more quickly you can make giant Jades. And Druid just got so much better at pulling that off and using things like Jade Idol and Nourish as sort of the glue to stick it all together to be this
Yeah,
really, really effective machine. Like, this is an extremely well-tuned deck right now.
definitely. So it's funny how well tuned it is, because I think it was like day 9 who said it. No, I don't think it was day 9. It might have been Raynad. Anyway, some pro was talking about how you pretty much just like search Jade in your collection and put 2 of all of those cards, and then like 2 Innervates, 2 Wild Growths, 2 Ultimate Infestations, and then like the rest of the deck is a flex, pretty much.
Yeah.
So part of the reason that the deck seems so powerful is that like we're still relatively early into the expansion.
Hmm.
It might feel like we've all played a lot of hours, and we might have played a lot of hours, but the expansion came out, like 3 weeks ago, and this deck is like relatively easy to get into a super highly tuned state, and all of the flex slots in the deck are like super apparent. It's obvious what the flex slots are, and you can just take those cards and turn them into other stuff that like beats whatever other decks are popular, which happens to be Jade Druid right now. So even cards that are as horrendous as Naturalize are just awesome and seeing play. I mean, Naturalize is being played right now because
Really?
it's yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, have you not run into Naturalize yet? Yeah, that
I've
card's
seen
totally
Mind
just in
Control
play.
tech.
Yeah, so I saw Tyler was running Mind Control Text. A lot of Druids are running Naturalize because, like, if they're casting Ultimate Infestations and Nourish, like, they already have a trillion cards in hand. Giving them 2 more doesn't really hurt them, and it might even overdraw them. And being able to swing the board for 1 mana, like, killing something and developing all of your own stuff at the same time is just so much more powerful. And, like,
I guess, yeah.
Druid just has infinite cards in hand already. They
Naturalized,
don't
man.
care. Yeah, it's unbelievable that card is seeing play. I mean, like Mulch is like, it took me some time to glom onto Mulch, and it's a good card. Naturalize, I don't think I could ever get into that card, but it's great. It's good right now, and
All
that's
right, I buy
unbelievable.
it.
Yeah, it's really
I'm
something.
excited to try that now.
It's silly. Yeah, I
But it
have
makes
one.
Skulkengeist hurt even more.
Yeah,
No, I
well,
guess
yeah,
you're
it
like
does.
you probably wouldn't want to even play the Naturalized like that you just immediately like, well, Naturalized is a terrible card, so it's fine.
Yeah, right.
That's the moment you start talking about how bad Naturalize is when they get it with Skulkengeist.
Yeah, I mean, Ultra Naturalize is like it's best against Druid, and Druid's obviously not running Skulkengeist. So a
Yeah.
deck that's playing Skulkengeist, if they get Naturalized, like they might help you a little bit, marginally. Um, killing a creature for 1 mana is fine, and like you don't even care if your opponent has 2 cards, because like you're still beating them in card advantage.
Always.
Yeah, so it's totally fine.
But that's
Um,
only one Druid deck.
yeah, so aggro Druid. Yeah, there's several. Aggro Druid is of course another Druid deck, and like we mentioned earlier, this one got Druid of the Swarm and Crypt Lord, which are just like those cards do wonders for the deck. So Tar Creeper was a card that found its way into Aggro Druid, and Crypt Lord is just a straight replacement for it. Uh, Basically, what you wanted out of that slot, and what Druid of the Swarm also gives you, is a way for you to protect your board so that you can develop behind it. It buys you like
Hmm.
1 or 2 turns of you just playing minions without the fear of them dying to other stuff on the board.
It almost sounds like too basic to really be the reasoning. Like Hearthstone 101, like your opponent has to attack top minions before they can attack your other minions. Like, is the
But that's
reason these
it.
cards are good. But that really is the reason these cards are good. But it's because they're so inexpensive
Yep.
and have so much health for how cheap they are.
Yeah.
And then also Cryptlord synergizes with what the deck's doing so extremely well. It will get 2 minions out of Pirate, or 5 minions out of Living Mana, or just play, or 2 minions out of Firefly for really low amounts of mana. So you can give it a bunch of health really fast, and then the things that you can protect can be really good, like Vicious Fledgling. And just the very beginning of the game is what matters the most with this deck, and this lets you set up a really strong early game and back it up, and it's less likely your opponent just has a way around a taunt minion like a fireball if it's the second turn.
Right.
They're also both better because of Innervate.
Yeah, so Innervates definitely pairs well with like I mean pretty much any card in the deck, but also these cards. Innervating out of Crippler in turn one is awesome because then like your Bloodsail Corsairs and your Fireflies just like make it beefier. It's hard for your opponent to get around it. Druid of the Swarm is flexible. You know, the poison is valuable, especially if
Hmm.
you already have a Cripplord or another Druid of the Swarm down. Um, and the card is also a Mark of Yashar's target. Like
Yes.
that was something I noticed with that deck, like trying to tune it, is that it kind of had like one or two slots it didn't know what to do with, and it was running like swipe, and you know you could stuff crabs in there and maybe have another 2-drop or like a Direwolf Alpha or something. But what it really wanted was like another solid 2-drop to replace Galactic Crawler. And before these taunts came out, Direwolf Alpha was just like not good enough. But with these taunts, Direwolf Alpha is awesome. So
Hmm.
first of all, but second of all, these taunts, like Druid of the Storm, is pretty much exactly what the deck wanted. It's a 2-drop beast that doesn't need to be in a particular matchup to shine. It's a non-crab, and
Yeah.
that's so good for the deck. The deck was missing pretty much exactly that. Um, and Cripplord is just a straight replacement for Dark Reaper. It's really good. It's just these cards streamline the deck a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. In Direwolf Alpha, like the thing about Tar Creeper, or not Tar Creeper, but Criblord and Druid of the Swarm is giving them one more power is really awesome, and
Oh
Direwolf
yeah,
Alpha is another way to do that.
yep, yeah. In addition to the lots of ways to do it, and like you know, Direwolf Alpha is kind of like the card that this sort of deck wants. You know, it allows you to set up like combo lines, kind of like you do with Flame Tongue Totem, except it's a little weaker.
Hmm.
But it's still a fine card that synergizes with the deck. It was still playable before these cards came out. It's just that with the taunts, it's a lot better because your opponents like can't just trade into it.
And it's a beast.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beast, so it just makes your Mark of your Charge less dead. There's a lot more hands you can keep that have Mark of your Charge in them, which is really good.
Hmm.
Um, so this deck, at least you know, last Thursday was boasting the highest win rate across all ranks, and just had like an insane matchup spread. I mean, even you know matchups that were classically really tough for the deck, like Token Shaman, which at the time was relatively untuned, but you know it was close to 50% win rate against those decks. Um, it's
And
it's really strong.
with like the crabs, it can be like devastating against Paladin Warrior and just get free wins, especially against Paladin.
Yeah, and that's really important. And Paladin's you know pretty prevalent right now. Partly because like Murloc Paladin, you know, it's a good deck and it got a bunch of other tools and it has a decent matchup against Druid. And you know, if you tech this aggro Druid just with Hungry Crabs, which is super easy, they fit right into the deck. You know, it's not any
They're
different
great
than
in
it
the
was
deck.
last season.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're awesome in the deck. Like the deck operates best when it can run crabs. Um, you know, that just gives it like massive tempo swings against tempo oriented decks, and that's like the way you win easy Hearthstone games.
Yeah, those are almost like, especially against Paladin, free wins.
Yep, totally. Um, why do you think it's Paladin in particular, not Warrior?
Because it's a bigger buff, and they play more of them. Like there's more Murlocs and Murloc Paladin than there are Pirates and Pirate Warrior.
It's a good point.
And the bigger threats are the really powerful Murlocs or the really early 1/3 Murlocs, and the big threats in Pirate Warrior are like the Arcanite Reapers.
That's true. I see what you're saying. So the Murlocs are a little bit more integral to the game plan. So taking them off those is a lot different than just taking Pirate Warrior off its minions, where it could still pretty easily win.
And you can get like a 3/4 on turn one and play another card very
Hmm.
easily, which is just like you're not going to lose to that point.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just definitely Hungry Crab comes out earlier than Glocker Crawler.
It just matters
Um,
more.
yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. I think there's multiple factors there. Also, I guess Paladin can like commit more into one minion. I mean, if you happen to
That's
draw your
very
Hungry Crab a
true.
little late, They might have like bone marred one of their Murlocs or Blessing of Kings or Spikered Steeded or something.
Or all of them.
Yeah, right. Or every one of the cards I just mentioned on the same minion,
Hungry
which like
crab. You
happens.
just pay 1 for a crab and destroy this giant minion.
I choose death.
Hearthstone.
Yeah, basically. But it's interesting, like, because of the addition of Druid of the Storm and Crypt Lord and how that makes cards like Direwolf Alpha better, the deck can operate without the crabs.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that's really different from last season. So I remember playing the deck a lot, and there were times where I felt like I wasn't running into a lot of Paladin, or I wasn't running into a lot of Warrior, just like random Knights or whatever, and I wanted to try to take them out, but I would remove them, and then, like, what am I putting in? I'm putting in, Direwolf Alpha, which is a lot worse at these taunts, like we said, or Spellbreaker, or, like, what else? It's just there wasn't a lot of good options.
Druid of the Claw.
Yeah, like that, but I'm not in the market for another, like, 5-drop. It's just the fact that these cards exist give the deck more of what it wants, and it gives it more options and the ability to, like, use its flex slots better.
Definitely.
And I think that makes the deck better.
So yeah, that deck just also and it has a really good game against Jade Druid, which is like one of the other reasons that is good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it can also cheat on mana. I mean, living mana in terms of power on the board to mana cost, living mana is unreal.
Yeah.
I mean,
unless your opponent has Vanish.
Yeah, or Devolve.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cards that can, just like stone beat that card, but it gives you a really good deal for the amount of mana that you're playing. And I mean, Vanish isn't that common, and like Devolve is less common, but it's also Devolve doesn't even necessarily shut it down.
I know Vanish is filthy against that card.
Oh yeah, Vanish just ends the game. You pretty much concede on the spot. I've totally had that happen when people were playing Quest Druid. It hurts. It doesn't feel good.
Reverse Exodia is like, I have the 5 trees of Exodia, and you're like, well, they're gone now.
Yes, I have the 1 tree of Vanish. Yeah, so that deck can just use its mana really efficiently, and that makes it super strong.
Yeah. So those are definitely the 2 main Druid decks,
mm-hmm.
And we sort of mentioned before, playing against 2 vastly different decks is hard. When they're the same class, it makes mulliganing very difficult.
Yeah, I think that works into all of this in this weird sort of nonlinear way that when you queue up against Paladin, the dude's gonna play like Tidecallers and Inquisitors, that. And you play against Warrior, like they're gonna probably play Fire, War Axe, and Pirates. And if you queue up against Druid, what are they doing? You don't know.
It's a mystery. I mean, they're gonna play Innervate.
That's for sure.
That is the one that is never a question. I feel like that's the one thing that you never have to ask yourself about. But then how the rest is going to go, are they going to basically not really do anything for the first few turns, or are they just going to blow you to pieces the first few turns? You don't know. It's one or the other.
Yep. Yeah, and it's hard to mulligan against that. I mean, like, you can have a hand that's really good against Jade Druid. Maybe it's got like a bunch of draw spells or like some turn 3 and 4 plays. But if you keep that hand, Token Druid can just beat you before you play any of those cards.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a nice like hand that can beat tokens, actually that's fine against Jade Druid. But like if you don't draw the stuff you need, they're gonna crush you with card advantage. So it's hard to like that. That makes it really challenging. Just the fact that there are those 2 decks. So.
Yeah, and that's why that winds up making proactive decks just better. Like,
yeah.
So if your best hand is not, the right answers, but rather just like really good minions or a really good set of cards for combo, then the fact that you don't know what your opponent is playing doesn't matter as much. Like if you're sort of playing a solo game, where if you assemble the right cards, no matter what your opponent is doing, you win. Like with the Exodia Mage deck, like I think that's one of the ways that that deck gets helped by the situation, is that it's just trying to go off as fast as possible, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. Or if you're playing like Murlocs, like Murloc Paladin, you just want the most aggressive hand. It doesn't matter what your opponent's doing. You just want to get a bunch of Murlocs out and play a Gentle Megasaur. and regardless of what your opponent's playing, that's what beats them.
Ah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I hadn't considered that, but I definitely agree with it. So if your mulligan is just like not contingent on your opponent's class at all, or like minimally contingent, I mean,
Hmm.
something like Murloc Paladin or Pirate Warrior, or even like Big Priest to an extent, then that's awesome. That puts you in like a fine spot, but that makes in addition to the fact that Jade Druid just crushes them, that makes like playing control deck that wants to have the right lineup of answers to your opponent's threats. Like playing control deck in this metagame is just like there's a lot of reasons you can't play it, and the mulligan decisions is certainly one of them.
Yeah, the Jade Druid just makes all the control decks like really loose choices.
Yeah.
And stuffing Skulking Geist winds up just making it that you lose to the other stuff more often, and you'll still lose to Jade Druid sometimes anyway.
Yeah, so I think like the class that maybe this affects the most or like most often is probably Jade Druid. When you're playing Jade Druid and you queue into a Druid. Um
Hmm. Yeah, that's
so
true.
that So that's like most of the time that's fine because in a way your deck is playing a proactive strategy. It's trying to ramp. So you can just mulligan for ramp and like win a lot of the games. But like what do you do with Wrath? Like let's say you have a hand that's like two cards you mulligan to Wrath and you're on the play. What do? You play it, you're against Druid. Um a lot of the times I actually tend to keep the Wrath
Me too.
because if it is a token Druid, like you're just really happy, and if it's a J Druid, like you might kill a 1/1 and cycle it, and that's fine too.
Yeah,
Um
for me. It's also like a solid keep. Ultimately, you need to like have the right board, and you want to just keep the board on your opponent, and hopefully you just have a moment to use that wrath early to swing something. They got once they hit that 3/3, make an efficient play with the wrath or something like that. Or yeah,
yeah,
just
I
cycle
agree.
it depending
Yeah, or
depending
totally.
on if you run out of stuff. But yeah, that I sort of am just trying to ramp faster and have more ramp and because that's the one thing that's good against both.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like that too. So, that's actually another interesting thing we should discuss is the J Druid mirror. But yeah, I guess as Druid you can kind of just mulligan for ramp and be fine. So maybe it's less of an issue for the decks that are seeing the most play right now because they're basically J Druid or strong proactive decks. But if you are playing a reactive deck, like maybe Rosaka's Priest, it's sort of tough on you.
Yeah, I think that's why those decks, with these specific answers and warrior, any kind of control warrior just isn't really working right now.
Yeah, it's
Even the
certainly part of the
control
issue.
the control warlock, like defile doesn't matter enough against Jade Druid.
No, not at all. It's like you'd imagine because the Jades sort of increase in power incrementally, but like in practice, that's just no, you're never going to kill them with Defile.
Yeah, once they get the first few turns it works, and then after that it's sayonara.
Yep, it's hopeless. Um, so I think that like I would like to discuss the J Mirror a little bit because
Mhm.
that's certainly a matchup that's probably happening more often than any other individual matchup.
Yeah, arguably.
But uh, I think it's really interesting. So it took me a little while and playing a bunch of games in that matchup and losing them to realize what exactly you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
But I think the J Druid mirror is about getting on board first.
Hmm.
In my experience, like your Jade counter, sort of what your next Jade is going to be, and your mana crystal count are like the two most important things in the matchup because the person who wins is like the one who sticks the boards of 6/6s plus first. If you can get like two Jades that are 6/6 or bigger, like before your opponent doesn't have an answer to them, then you probably win.
Yeah, there's a few reasons for that. They're basically Jade Behemoth and Spreading Plague. Also
Yeah,
Malfurion, like the minions in your deck that matter, that aren't Jades, their health starts mattering around 5 and ends mattering around 6. Fandral Staghelm, all the 1/5 taunts, Jade Behemoth. So I think it's once you get that 5/5 and the 6/6 out, if you can do that really fast, that's when all of your opponent's plays somehow are like just way less value, and then at that point they're just on their back foot and they're never gonna be able to accelerate again because every play every minion they're putting out is gonna be only a portion of one of your minions when you smash it. So that I think that's the the reason that's that critical number. Um, and yeah, I really think it's mostly your mana crystals, because if you can really accelerate your mana crystals, you can either play your other Jade cards faster or play your ultimate infestation sooner.
Yep. Yeah.
And doing either one of those will put you in have more of a board.
Yeah, infesting lets you have a proactive turn before your opponent, which is really nice. I mean, like, Jade Behemoth into Jade Spear is a really good play against Jade Druid, and if you can do that, like while they don't have a board out, even if your Jades are really small, like 3/3s and 4/4s, you're going to be in a really good spot
Hmm.
because you advance your Jade counter, and they have to take a turn off to deal with it. Because if they develop into it, you can just trade and then redevelop,
Yeah,
and then they're just on the back foot.
I've had plenty of games where I was behind on Jades, but I just got to the ultimate infestation first and then came back from there.
Yep, totally.
And if you're too far behind, it's not going to work. But unfortunately, those times I was not.
Yeah, right, right. So yeah, it's not like you just cast Ultimate Infestation first and you win the game. I mean, you need to be able to back it up afterwards, and like you can't just be losing
Yeah, I'd say if you're
when you do it.
behind like 4 Jades, you're probably effed no matter what you do.
Yeah, yeah, that's gonna be really
But
tough.
but most of the time I was behind by 2. Like I had 2 2s and they had 4 4s, and then a 5 5 off Ultimate Infestation turned things around. It's like
Yep.
math that nice 4 4s.
Yeah, the 5/5 that comes off is like randomly useful. It's the thing
Yeah,
I kind of consider the least, but it's just like it's awesome to get. I mean, the card is ridiculous.
ghouls are a girl's best friend.
Definitely. That's 100% true. Um, Yeah, I mean this it's been really interesting to see how that deck has worked in meta. So actually, my funny story with Jade Druid is that right before Knights of the Frozen Throne came out, I was having a lot of luck with Jade Druid on the ladder, and I used it to climb to 5, thinking like, all right, I'm going to be at rank 5 when Knights of the Frozen Throne comes out, so I can sort of rush Legend as fast as I can, and I'm going to play Jade Druid because like this deck is fun. I haven't gotten to play it a lot. Like,
Mm,
I'm going to play it while I know it's still like a viable deck.
until it no longer is.
Yeah, and then and then Knights of the Frozen Throne came out, and I played Jade Druid a lot more.
There hasn't been a more viable deck in months, if not
Oh yeah,
years.
yeah, definitely for a real long
Last time
time.
it might have been Druid with Force of Nature and
Right,
Saboteur.
yeah, Force of Nature, Savager, or maybe like Patron Warrior or something.
Yeah, or possibly Patron Warrior. But I think accelerating fast, and then there's also certain tech, like I think mind control tech is good in the mirror. Like you're
Hmm.
both sort of trying to build up boards and like go over, sometimes you're not bothering to kill their minions because if you hit them, they'll be forced to kill yours. And then you just build a big board, they build up a big board, and then you mind control tech. And
Yep.
that kind of swing, um, because that gives you 7 mana. You can like also play Fandral or also play Jade Behemoth. You're gonna be needing to spend your mana as efficiently as possible to win the mirror on and get as much board out of your mana out of your mana as possible. And mind
Hmm.
control tech can get you like a 4 4 or 5 5, so that, or even a 3 3. But at that point, you're still getting a lot of power and toughness, or power damage and mana damage and health rather, um,
Mm.
on your side, and diminishing theirs as well. And that swing is the kind of way to win that mirror match as well.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I guess in summary, we've been seeing a lot of Druid, and there's a lot of discussion and even demands from the community and within the community about balance.
Yeah, I mean, like if you really like Druid, then this is good. Because then you
So
can play Druid a lot and win a lot. But overall, like this is probably not good for Hearthstone.
I think so. I mean, one again, we're only 3 weeks into the metagame,
Hmm.
and things can still change. But at pretty much like from the first couple days forward, we have had just this overrepresentation of Druid. I mean, the fact that Druid is powerful was discovered really quickly because you pretty much took the stock J Druid list, took out Gadget Sand Auctioneers, and replaced them with Ultimate Infestations, and you had one of the most powerful decks available.
Ta-da!
Yeah, and like definitely the deck has like changed since then. I mean, people discovered that Earth and Scales is a lot less good with that Auctioneer, et cetera, and like Primordial Drakes aren't as good. But it's still like you could actually just still run those cards and do fine.
Hmm.
Um, and that just like hasn't changed. The deck has just gotten slightly more teched and tuned and powerful
And
since then.
Token Druid has a similar story. If you just swap out like two things, the Crypt Lord and the um, Druid of the Swarm in, and now you have this insane tier 1 deck. And
Yep,
that was
totally,
also done very early on. Though once again, without doing those changes, you still have a really, really, really good deck. So, and that was
totally.
definitely obviously figured out before the set came out. So it's
Yeah,
not the fact that it's still that way 3 weeks in is definitely significant.
yeah.
And so people are talking about well, you know, uh, if not being able to play other classes and then not having proper diversity is an issue. What do we do to solve it?
Right. So there's a few things. I mean, the most like so one thing that's gotten a lot of traction that a lot of people that Reynad proposed first actually, or I mean, people probably proposed it before him, but he was like the first really popular person to propose it was to Hall of Fame innervate or to in some way nerf innervate.
I think that the specific idea of putting Innervate in the Hall of Fame is a really good idea, and it possibly was even something they considered when they first made the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, totally. I think that like innervate is one of those cards that just creates non-games. Like it pretty much does nothing or it creates an unfair game. And it's a polarizing card in that regard. I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about this on previous episodes. Like if you're playing Token Druid and you draw your turn 7 innervate, it's like wow, I just wish I could have drawn any other card in my deck.
hmm
Like literally any other card in my deck. But uh, now, but like if you have it in your opening hand, it's just like one of the best cards there. You're like, wow, I can keep my Bittertide Hydra.
Yeah, like now I can just win like a few turns in and then move on to the next game at any rank. It doesn't matter.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's just like no counterplay available to your opponent. And actually the card is like the Innervate's downside, its late game downside, has actually been less of an issue for J Druid now that they have all this card draw because like just having 12 mana crystals is awesome.
Yeah, now Innervate just lets you ride that ultimate infestation like sooner or harder. Like if you're
Yep.
like, well, if I also hit the Wrath, then I absolutely cannot lose this game. You're like, oh, there's the Wrath. Or like you have Malfurion hero power, like hitting Innervate, like, oh, I also get to get 3 armor, 3 more armor. Like this card is just
Yep.
so dumb right now.
Yeah, so Innervate definitely lets Druid be pretty, pretty lame. It's really a staple in aggro Druid. I think it like helps that deck do degenerate things quite a lot, and possibly more than Jade Druid, but
Hmm.
it's still great in Jade Druid. I mean, it can let you get out your nourish faster, or it can let you sequence your like 2 Jade Blossoms a little bit better.
Yeah,
I I think that Jade Druid would still be a strong deck without Innervate.
yeah. See, I think the longevity issue that Jade Druid presents that sort of like stops fatigue decks from winning would still be there. But now there is
Hmm.
Skulkengeist. So I feel like nerfing Innovate in some way, putting in the Hall of Fame, because I think it is a fine card in Wild,
Yeah.
might be the best, or probably is the best solution because that's really what makes the two decks degenerate and gives
Yeah.
you the most on games, and it's what makes Skulk. It's a lot of what makes Skulking Geist not enough. Actually, I think that it'd
I
be really
I think you're
cool to
right.
see if like Skulking Geist could work with no Innervate. I think that would really be a better story. I think it's not fair right now. That card is just too slow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely Skulking Guys comes out far too late to really matter. Because at that point you're like, your opponent's already like pretty far ahead, and just playing a 5 mana 4/6 is not really going to pull it back for you. It's like you're playing that so that they can't beat you 10 turns later, but like they'll just beat you 5 turns
It
later.
needed to be like a 1 mana 1/3 legendary, like Sir Finley Murgleton, and that
Oh
way
yeah,
it's just like good against the aggro decks, and then like you can actually get their turn one Jade Idol sometimes, like then that would be a card
Oh
that
yeah.
would could actually maybe matter against Innervate. But I think that Innervate is probably the big problem card. I do think that another way to look at it is nerfing Jade Idol in some way with regard to its infinity. But I
Hmm.
think Jade Druid would still be really, really strong and have no effect on Token Druid at all.
Yep.
I don't really think that would be the way to go.
Yeah,
Um,
that's I think that like yeah, I mean Innervate, part of the reason that people like the Innervate solution is that it simultaneously hits every Jade deck and it like particularly attacks one of the more degenerate things they can do.
mhm.
Um and I think it would leave Jade Druid intact and maybe even still really powerful, so you might even have to supplement that with some kind of ultimate infestation nerf.
Yeah, that's definitely another problem card. And I think it's really more of an actual problem than Jade Idol. I think it'd be really nice to see them leave Jade Idol alone and let Skulkengeist figure that out. And I think you really said the most important thing, that the most degenerate stuff, the most unfair, unpleasant, unfun stuff is done by Innervate.
Yeah.
And theoretically the game is supposed to be fun. Every now and then we remember that. For a split second and amongst hours, we'll be like, "Oh yeah, this is a game and it's fun." Um,
Right.
and I think Innervate is maybe the source of the least fun portions and the least fun things about playing against these Druid decks.
Yeah, I think so
It's
too.
also it restricts deck building. You basically are building a 28 card deck in Druid. That's also kind of unfun as a Druid player. As someone that loves Azure Drake, I was still kind of happy to see it go just to get, the opportunity to play more Burgly Bullies.
Yeah, right. Sure. Or something like Ragnaros. You can see Ragnaros go because like, now you can play stuff like Lich King.
Yep, and Obsidian Statue.
Right. Uh yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know. On the other hand, Innervate is so core to Druid's identity, and a lot of Druid has been designed with, the existence of Innervate in mind. Um, I don't know whether that'll actually like. I don't know if that latter point that I made, that like, Innervate was considered when all these cards were designed. I don't know if that would actually affect the viability of Druid as a whole,
Hmm.
but it would definitely impact like the strength of some of their cards. Like
Yeah,
maybe some of the cards that are like really marginal now with Innervate around would just be like really bad later.
yeah,
Um,
but like on the other hand, other cards would become better. And
yep,
and it definitely is a flavor hit because Innervate's like a really Druid flavor thing to do. But
totally.
like they got rid of Conceal and Power Overwhelming. Like at the end of the turn, it dies horribly. Like that's what the text on the card says. Like it's such
It's
a
true.
cool, flavorful card, but they recognize that it was too much for its mana cost, and I think they might have to accept that with Innervate also. Um, and yeah, other ramp. There's so much other ramp.
It's
There's
true.
still so many other ramp cards. Maybe people are gonna start playing pilfered whatever, pilfered power
Ah, yeah, yeah. The thing that ramps you for like all the minions your opponents control or
for
something like
that
that.
you control.
Oh, that you control,
But
right?
there's either way, like it's not taking wild growth out. I think that would be way too much of a flavor hit. That'd be like taking
Yes.
out Frostbolt or Fire War Axe, but that's not what I'm talking about. I do think that Innervate is like a high level spell, and
Yeah.
and that it might be time for it to join the other high level 0 to 1 mana spells.
Yeah, I mean, having like zero mana's 0 and 1 mana are really low costs. Also, I think that that's like maybe less of a thing in Hearthstone than it is in something like Magic, where you can play spells on your opponent's turn. But it's still, yeah, Innervate is still like cheap. You could play it on basically any turn and get value out of it in like the vast majority of situations. Core to the class identity, yeah, but it would certainly hurt all the Druid decks. It's an easy nerf. There might be more. There might be ways that you can nerf a set of cards without nerfing Innervate. I don't know if you would want to go that route because like I mean, okay, I think Ultimate Infestation is not balanced on its own, but I do think that a card like Living Mana is.
Yeah,
Um,
and
where like, yeah, if you hit Living Mana, I mean, obviously you weaken aggro Druid tremendously, but like, it feels bad to nerf a balanced card.
yeah, and Ultimate Infestation maybe is imbalanced, but I think it's a lot more fair when there's no Innervate in the deck. I think the fact that you might overdraw, and the fact that it's going to be all of your mana for that turn, and the fact that you can't play it on turn 8 are all sort of nerfs to Ultimate Infestation, even though that would be an Innervate nerf.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the one of the more degenerate things you can do is just play Ultimate Infestation early. I mean, like the existence of that card warps the way you use other cards, and with Innervate out, like you might not be able to, you might be like, oh, I'm gonna hold this Innervate that I, have in my opening hand, even though I have perfectly good 3 mana plays. I'm gonna hold it so that I can play my Ultimate Infestation late, like earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't exist, then like you just won't have the option to do that, and that could be better. It could be like more fair.
Like, the more efficiently you can just blow cards for mana to jam that Ultimate Infestation, the better it gets, and nothing does that in a more unfair way than Innervate.
Yep, absolutely. And like you don't even care that it costs you a full card because you're just gonna draw
You
5.
would pay like 2 cards, 3 cards.
Yeah.
You're about to draw 5 and blow something up and get a 5/5 and 5 armor.
Yep. So another consideration though is like with the Hall of Faming of Innervate is that like I don't know the wild metagame that well, but I imagine like currently,
Mm-hmm.
but I imagine that Jade Druid's probably pretty strong there. However, I think that the fatigue decks in Wild, something like Reno Mage, are way, way more powerful than the fatigue decks that are in Standard. So I think Skulking Geist is more powerful in Wild than it is in Standard. This is speculation. It could be that that's not true and that the proactive decks still make Skulking Geist too much of a liability to run your deck, but I can imagine a Singleton Mage in Wild, with like Reno and Ice Blocks being able to slot in Skulking Geist no problem, and then actually fatigue out a Jade Druid while answering all of their Jades.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine that pretty easily.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe Hall of Faming Innervate's like not a huge deal.
Yeah.
That's certainly a criticism I heard of that particular nerf proposal is that like, well, that doesn't solve the Wild problem.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the Wild. I don't even know if there's enough data to worry enough about it yet.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, like I'm saying what I'm saying from a place of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speculating that it's not gonna be like as big a deal in Wild. It's something that I
Oh, okay.
definitely intend to study once the season turns. But we will see what they end up doing if they do anything at all.
Yeah, that'll be exciting to see.
Yeah, definitely. I've been sort of waiting with bated breath to see any balance adjustments they come out with. But Druid, I'm sorry, Blizzard has engaged. It's wrong words that ends with D. They have engaged with the community a little bit and mentioned that they are watching Druid and they're looking at the play rates and the decks that are winning and the cards that are winning and all of that stuff, and they're considering their options. So if things do get worse or they stay the same, I think that we can expect a balance update to happen.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are in absolutely no position to tell you when it's going to happen, but I think we're both in the position we both, I think at least personally, that it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, based on their past activity. So in the meantime, best of luck with your Druid games. Good luck with Malfurion, everybody.
Yeah, there's certainly one phrase that's real good and real relevant here, and that's if you can't beat him, join him.
Yep, I definitely took that route. Took me to
Yep.
Legend.
Same here. I've been playing it a lot in Legend, and it's been good. So if you want to join us, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/lastturnhs. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/lastturnhs. You can find us on iTunes. You can get there by going to www.lastturnhs.com. You can also find us on YouTube and a plethora of other websites like SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play if you happen to have an Android phone. And yeah, we hope that you really like the episode and you listen to some of our other ones and give us some feedback. Hit us up on Twitter, and if you have any questions or any suggestions as to what we should talk about or you disagree with us, please come tell us about it.
Yes, especially if you disagree with us. We would love to hear what you have to say.
Oh yeah, I love being wrong. It's my favorite thing.
And yep, you can message us on Facebook. We got email address. Thank you so much for listening.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you guys, and we'll catch you next turn.
See you next turn.